Welcome. We are in session 5 of our 8-part series on contentment. And today we are going to be looking at the heart of the matter when it comes to our discontentment. So we talked before about how the source of our contentment is God Himself. And today we're going to explore the source of our discontentment. And we're going to look at what is going on in our hearts when we are wrestling with desires within us. A few years ago, I was at a park with some fellow moms. This park was a favorite of ours because it had a fence surrounding it. And so we could sit on the park benches and all of the children could safely play and they were rounded in and we could have adult conversation while they all played together. Some of the older children came up to us and they said, would it be okay if we played on the field just outside the fence? So the mothers, we all kind of talked together and we decided our answer was no. We wanted them to stay in the fence because as soon as the older kids went to outside the park, then the younger kids were going to want to go outside of the fence. And right beside that field was a busy street. And so we didn't want anyone playing in the field because, of course, the soccer ball would roll out into the middle of the traffic. So we told them that they had to stay in. So the moms, we went back to our chatting, and about 5 minutes later, I looked up, and there were those 7 older children, and they were standing at the fence, and they were staring at the field. Now, behind them, as they looked into this field, was a playground with slides and a sandbox and monkey bars and all sorts of things for their amusement. But they chose to stand and look at the field that was denied them. And that, for me, became the image of myself. And this is how the Lord teaches us through motherhood a lot about ourselves often. That became the image to me of what happens when I covet. I miss what has been given because I am so busy staring at what is denied. And so these children didn't enjoy one another. And they didn't enjoy their playtime at all. They missed what had been given because they were focused on what was denied. So as we explore the heart of this issue, we're going to look inside and say, what is it in our desires that causes us to miss the good things God has given? Why do we tend to spend our lives focusing on what is lacking rather than look at what is given? And really, what I want us to focus on, if the source of our contentment was God's character, the source of our discontentment, the source of our coveting is unbelief. It was Thomas Watson who said it this way: discontentment is nothing but the echo of unbelief. Remember, distrust is worse than distress. You hear that? Our distrust of God is actually worse than whatever distress we may find ourselves. So our discontentment is simply reflecting back to us our unbelief. And I want us to look at 3 areas that we're usually struggling with unbelief when we find our desires have turned sour. And this is in 3 ways. We have unbelief in the character of God, unbelief in our true home, and unbelief in our true purpose. So the first thing I want us to focus on is unbelief in God's character. So as we talked about before, we went through multiple characteristics of God and we looked at how that sources our contentment. I want to primarily talk about how when we covet, when we are discontent, we are primarily distrusting 2 characteristics of God: His sovereignty and His goodness. We either want to say, God can't be in control of my life because He never could have planned this. Or we want to say, He clearly can't be good if this is part of His will for me. There's a confession I love that really explains God's goodness and His sovereignty. It's the Belgian Confession. They put words together way better than we do now. And so I want to read a little bit It describes what it means that God is reigning over all things. And this essentially is what we are not believing when we covet. Here's what it says. We believe that the same God, after he had created all things, did not forsake them or give them up to fortune or chance, but that he rules and governs them according to his holy will, so that nothing in this world happens without his appointment. And then it skips down to say this. This doctrine affords us unspeakable consolation, since we are taught nothing can happen to us by chance, but by the direction of our gracious and heavenly Father, who watches over us with paternal care, keeping all creatures so that under his power, not a hair of our head, for they are all numbered, nor a sparrow can fall to the ground without the will of our Father. Essentially, when we covet, we are either saying, God, you're not really in charge, like this says, or we're saying you're not really good. The image I like to put in my head to remind me of what I'm doing when I start questioning God's will for my life is this one. If you were to picture the wall behind me, and we were to say this whole wooden part of the wall is everything that God knows and understands about the universe. Well, now we're greatly limiting God by doing that because we know he's infinite and his knowledge is infinite. So if we were to say, this is all the knowledge that God knows is what's behind me. And then if I were to walk up and I were to put the smallest dot on that board, that dot would represent me, of what I know about the universe and what I know about what's going on in all of eternity. And I would be greatly overestimating myself, actually, with that small dot. And when I look at God, the dot, the finite dot, and say to the infinite God who knows everything, all creation, and I look at him and I say, I don't think you have it right. I am the dot looking at the infinite God and telling him, I don't think you're reigning over things very well. Can you imagine the pride of that little dot? And that's the image I say to myself when I find myself saying, how can this be good? How can this trial in any way be for my good? I remember this is how big I am. Just because I do not understand how something could be for my good does not make it not true. It just means I am limited in my understanding. And I am trusting a God who has no limits. So essentially, my discontentment comes from my disbelief of who God is. I do not trust that he is who he says he is, and therefore my discontentment wakes up. And it also, secondly, is me saying to God, I don't think you're enough. I need God plus something else to source my contentment. John Piper notes that essentially this is why the first commandment and the last commandment are almost the same thing. He says it this way. Have you ever considered that the 10 commandments begin and end with virtually the same commandment? You shall have no gods before me, and you shall not covet are almost equivalent. Coveting is desiring anything other than God in a way that betrays a loss of contentment and satisfaction in him. Covetousness is a heart divided between two gods, so Paul calls it idolatry. Essentially, our coveting says, God, I don't believe you're enough for me. And so it is part of our discontentment gets fueled by our unbelief in who God is. That's the first one. The second one is that discontentment results for our unbelief in our true home. When we put all of our eggs in this basket called earth, we are going to find ourselves perpetually discontent. This earth is not our home, but we like to live as though it is. I don't know if you've ever had the experience of living away from your native country. A few years ago, my husband and I lived for 6 months in Cambridge, England. We took all of our kids over there. He was a visiting professor. And when we got there, I knew immediately I was not home. You know, they put you in the passport line that says visitors, yeah, and so you're not home anymore. And then, you know, you get on the roads and you really realize you're not home when you're driving on the wrong side. The first time I took the car out driving, I think I broke probably 3 to 4 traffic laws that I had no idea were traffic laws because I wasn't home. I wasn't driving on the right side of the road, in my opinion. We got to our home that was a British home, and it was a nice place to live, but it was nothing like my American home. It had what I consider a dorm-sized refrigerator, and we had 6 people living in the house together, and so it was like playing Tetris every time we got the groceries. There was no dishwasher, so my children, they were 2 and 5 and 8 at the time, quickly learned how to wash dishes. There's nothing like learning to do chores when there's no dishwasher in the home. And so the other things in the house, everything was different. You know, it wasn't quite the decor I would choose. Everything was just not home. But there was something about being there that it didn't really hit me and make me discontent, and this is why. When I would be at my sink, looking out at the window, hearing my children in the garden playing, doing dishes, because that's what I did a lot of there, I knew that I was not home. And I knew that back in America, I had a home that ridiculously had 2 refrigerators. One was in the garage for all the extra things, and one was in the home. We had a dishwasher. We had a big washer and dryer, because in Britain ours was very small. We had all those things we were used to in our home back in America. And so when I was in Britain, I could just relax and enjoy the experience because I knew the comforts of home awaited me. So I could walk through that experience and say, I'm just going to enjoy this for what it is. We're just going to be here and live here and enjoy it. I've got homecoming. The reality is we have homecoming. And so this world is full of discomfort. It's full of things we don't always like. We are traveling. And sometimes when you travel, as we've talked about before, things don't go as planned. And when we view ourselves as fellow travelers, we will find that we are more content because we expect less. But when we expect this world to satisfy us like the world we're made for, then we will find ourselves being discontent. When we consider this our home, we will never be satisfied here. And that's the irony. By putting our eggs in this basket, we will actually not enjoy being here. But when we spend our time hoping and longing and waiting for the home to come, when we have a good longing, it will actually foster hopeful living. Sometimes in ministry, we give up things in life that can be hard in the reality of living life. Sometimes to my head, I look at my husband and we talk about this and we say, anything we've given up here, it will be ours there. And it makes us look forward to heaven in new ways when we hope in that home that is coming. The third thing, so we have unbelief about the character of our God. We have unbelief about the home that we're looking for. And then the third thing, we have unbelief about our purpose. And this is going to cause us to find ourselves discontent. We believe our purpose a lot of times when we come to Christ is that now we will have our best life right now here. And so when we believe that is our purpose, we will find ourselves perpetually dissatisfied. C.S. Lewis always puts words together so beautifully, and he says this, imagine yourself as a house. God comes to rebuild that house. At first, you can understand what he is doing. He's getting the drains right, stopping the leaks and the roof and so on. You knew those jobs needed doing, so you're not surprised. But presently, he starts knocking the house about in a way that hurts abominably and does not seem to make sense. What on earth is he up to? The explanation is that he is building quite a different house than the one you thought of. He's throwing out a wing here, putting on an extra floor there, running up towers, making courtyards. You thought you were going to be made into a decent little cottage, but he is building a palace. He intends to come and live in it himself. We dream much smaller dreams for ourselves than God dreams for us. He wants to make us into the image of his Son. He has our best good always in his mind when he is bringing circumstances into our lives. The good he is working for is so much better than the good we would dream up for ourselves. But we still tend to compare our purpose with the purpose he's given other people. I'd like for you to picture a moment, a potter, and he's got a cabinet. And in his cabinet is a plate and there's a teacup. And he created them both in his kiln. And I'd like for you to think about this teacup. And she looks at the plate and she says, oh, the plate. The plate gets brought out every day. And the plate gets to hold all these amazing foods. Every day, the master uses the plate in all these ways. I only typically hold one thing. And I only get brought out on special occasions. And I'm rather fragile. The plate is strong. The plate is good. The master must love the plate more because the master uses the plate more. Now, on the other side of the cupboard, the plate is looking at the teacup. And the plate is saying to the teacup, wow, I wish I had the life of the teacup. The teacup must be really special to the master because he only brings her out on special occasions. And the teacup has all these pretty curves. And the kiln was much less hot for the teacup. I had to go through a lot hotter fire than the teacup. The master must love the teacup more because she is so special to him. Now, we look at that and we kind of laugh, but this is often how we live our lives, isn't it? The reality from both the teacup and the plate is they are needed in the master's cabinet. He needs them both, and he made them for his purposes and his glory. And he uses them both, and they are both good. Yes, they serve different purposes, but they are good. And the reality is for each of us, God knows our frame. He knows each individual. He knows just how hot the kiln needs to be for me and for you. He knows exactly what circumstances would work in my life to make me more like Jesus. And he knows exactly what circumstances would work in your life to make you like Jesus. His goal is not to make our lives look like each other. The goal of the Christian life is not fairness. The goal of the Christian life is holiness, and it's so much better. And we are all created differently, so we all have different needs when it comes to how we are formed and shaped. And that is what our God is in the process of doing. So our discontentment essentially just shows our distrust in his purpose for our lives. Now, these three things, this distrust and this unbelief in God's character, this unbelief in our purpose, and this unbelief in our home, essentially are going to well up into what I consider the saddest result, and that is ingratitude for the cross. You see, essentially, our coveting says, we look at God and we say, yeah, I think you might love me. I'm not really sure because you're denying me whatever X, Y, or Z might be in our lives. But essentially what we're saying to God when we say that is the cross was not enough of a declaration of I love you. We're saying, I'm still waiting for you to prove it to me, God. Jesus bore all of our sins on the cross for each of us. And here we are questioning his love for us because of the size of our home or the state of our marriage or the struggles we face. And that's essentially what we do when we covet. We look at God and we say, I'm not really quite convinced you've been good to me. And he has said in the loudest way possible, I love you. He stretched out his arms on a cross and he died for you. And we still struggle to believe. And that is what is sourcing our discontentment. If the discontent person often says to herself, and let me say we've all said this, particularly to our siblings, life is not fair. The contented Christian woman says to herself, you're right, life is not fair and it has been not fair in my favor. Because the contented Christian woman says, I deserve hell and wrath and destruction. And I have been given eternity and life and hope and peace with God. So yes, it's not fair. But the contented Christian woman understands that life is desperately not fair in her favor. That Christ took everything that was wrong with her and he atoned fully for her so that she could spend an eternity in heaven. I'll close with this quote. Again, it's from The Rare Jewel of Christian Contentment. It's an excellent read. And this is what he says. Though I cannot know what your afflictions are, I know what your mercies are. And I know they are so great that I am sure there can be no afflictions in this world as great as the mercies you have. If it were only this mercy that you have this day of grace and salvation continued to you, it is a greater mercy than any affliction. Set any affliction beside this mercy and see which would weigh the heaviest. This is certainly greater than any affliction, that you have the day of grace and salvation, that you are not now in hell. This is a greater mercy. Our God has saved us. We as women, as we remember that we have been rescued, we will rest content in all things. It is our unbelief that leads to our discontent that we will see in our next session that will lead to our disobedience, and that will lead to greater discontent. So we will study that in our next session as we look at Eve and Achan and the tale of two coveters. That's what I like to call them.